All right, so for those watching the recording or watching live on Facebook and those here, welcome to Gender Terminology. This is our first event of the year, and after kind of taking a break as a whole organization for about a year, it's very exciting to be back in action. So to introduce myself, I'm Rowan Blackwood. My pronouns are they, them, and he, him. I'm the founder president of Respect All Love, and I'll be giving you a lot of information today, but bear with me and definitely put any questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. If you have any like technology issues or something, you can also put that in there and probably Robin will be able to help you out. But yeah, if that is all, then I will start. Oh, that is the wrong thing. That's what happened. Okay. All right. So we're going to kind of dive into a lot at first, but it will get more specific and a little bit easier following this kind of initial terminology, so I can use some of these things throughout the presentation and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So to start, LGBTQ+, it covers all identities that are not cisgender, hetero, romantic, and heterosexual. So there's like LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and you may have seen elongated acronyms with many more letters, but if it's not those three things listed, it's included. That's all you really need to know. TGNC is a little less popular, I think, but it stands for transgender and gender nonconforming, and it also includes non-binary. So that's just kind of a general term for really the identities we'll be talking about today. Now, a quick rundown. Transgender is when someone's gender identity differs from someone's assigned sex at birth. And we'll get a little more into that specific term in a little bit. Non-binary is an umbrella term, though some people may use it as their sole gender identity label. It just varies, but it includes anything that doesn't conform to the binary male-female. It may be a combination, it may be no gender at all, it may be a combination, something else entirely, like a third gender. There's just a wide range. So kind of like if you see bigender or agender, gender fluid, like any of those terms, it's likely it's under this. Gender nonconforming, on the other hand, may overlap, may not. It can be when someone's expression differs from typical gender roles. So the clothing, the hair, mannerisms may be included, kind of depends on who you ask. But someone cisgender, someone who's not trans, can also be considered gender nonconforming. It's not just transgender people. Cisgender, like I just said, basically means not trans. So for at least a lot of people I know here that are allies and don't consider themselves trans, you are cisgender. If you're reading something that mentions cisgender people, that's probably you, which is just good to be aware of. And lastly, intersex. I'm not touching too much on this today, but I just want people to be aware of it. It's when, usually like when a baby's born, they'll be like, oh, it's a boy, it's a girl. Intersex is when there's like biological sex characteristics that don't conform to the binary male-female physically. So there's a wide range of differences, whether it's chromosomes, whether it's internal or external. Some people don't even know they're intersex at all, or they find out late. So that's something to kind of do more research on your own. That's not what today's thing is about, but some intersex people do end up identifying as trans, so I wanted to include it. All right, a little more of running down some terms before we get into it. Assigned sex at birth, I've mentioned already, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the labels given to someone when they're born. This is typically the phrase you want to use rather than saying someone used to be a different gender or they were it's another way of saying they were born female, but rather than saying like born in a female body or they used to be a man or any of those things, assigned sex at birth, like assigned female or assigned male at birth, is the best way to go about it. Gender/gender identity. So I included both because there's kind of some mix on which to use. I prefer just saying gender, but some people, even in the community, say gender identity. Just depends. But that's someone's internal sense regarding their gender. So gender expression may vary any type of way, regardless of someone's gender. Like we said, hair, clothing, also pronouns, possibly physical transitioning aspects. So speaking of detransitioning, gender dysphoria is the feeling of discomfort, for lack of a better word, when someone's gender doesn't match their assigned sex, basically meaning they're trans, and that causes them some kind of discomfort, to put it lightly. It may be around the physical aspects of your body. It may be language like pronouns or like girlfriend, boyfriend, those kinds of words, or the expression. And just a side note, don't ask someone what they're dysphoric about. There's not really any need for you to know unless like you're a doctor or they want to talk about it with you. And really that conversation will just make them more uncomfortable. So it's best to avoid. Now, pronouns, the words we use to talk to and about each other, it includes first and second person pronouns as well. Like I, me, and you, those are also pronouns, and we tend to forget that, I think. But then also they, them, theirs, he, him, his, she, her, hers. And we've already done intros with pronouns today, so I know you know it, and everyone did great with that, but still good to touch on. Transitioning can include a number of things. It's not just medical transitioning. So using new pronouns, some trans people find a new name, the different gender expression, or it could be medical, like hormones and surgeries. Another thing is don't ask about surgeries. It's typical for, maybe not typical, but it happens a lot. People asking, have you had the surgery? And it's more complicated than that. There's different surgeries to choose from or that go hand in hand. There's hormones, and also not everyone has to go through any of that to be valid. So it's just unnecessary. Like if somebody came up to you and was like, hey, what's your medical history? It's an uncomfortable conversation, you can imagine. And lastly, sexuality and orientation, someone's romantic and or sexual attraction. So whether it's like they're attracted to women, men, non-binary folk, whatever, there's all these different terms. The most important thing I wanted to include is that anyone of any gender can be any sexuality or orientation. I know when I came out as trans, a lot of people were like, so what does that mean for your sexuality? Or what does that mean for your partner? And they're separate things. So yeah, it's kind of unrelated. All right, that was all of the kind of messy terminology. Now we're gonna kind of break it down a little bit, one piece at a time. So starting with pronouns, I did ask you guys to include pronouns in your introductions because I want to kind of get everyone, if possible, to get in the habit of giving your pronouns and asking others for theirs. A lot of times, like in class, for example, I'll be the only trans person, and I try to put my pronouns like on my Zoom thing, since we're virtual now, in all my classes, just so that people are more aware. But then me being the only one, it's like, oh, look, it's a trans person, which I'm out and proud, it's fine. But the more that other people and allies do it as well, the more it normalizes things. And then it's not about like, oh, you're so different, and oh, I have to learn this whole new thing. It's just everybody's asking, everybody's giving them, which takes me into social media bios. Like, it's just there. Like, with that, you don't even have to have a conversation about it. It's just sitting there, and it's just about normalizing it. The more we see it, the more we get used to it. Simple as that. Now, singular they, probably if you've had conversations or concerns about pronouns, it's likely come from singular they. um, I can see one's nodding your head because I was that conversation, but it's all good. It's it does take some getting used to, and I think we all understand that, like trans and non-binary folk coming out and trying new pronouns and stuff, like we get it. It takes time to figure out, especially if you're not aware of it. My thing is, like, we use they in a singular way without even realizing it often. So then when somebody says, hey, this is my pronouns, it's just becoming aware of it and then, using it for that person particularly. But if someone's like, hey, someone's on the phone for you, and then you say, what do they want? You're probably going to do that without even realizing it. Like, unless there's been some English, like an English teacher I had that was like, he or she, and like even said it in most everyday language. But even she said they on occasion without realizing it. But yeah, and the next part, being corrected or correcting yourself, really the only thing I can say about that is just don't make a big deal out of it. Again, we understand it takes time. We've had to do that ourselves with other people and with our own identity. So yeah, just like be like, if you're saying, oh, well, she went, and then just, oh, wait, they, and continue. You don't have to stop and sit on it for a long time or apologize profusely or anything. And if you're correcting someone else, then what I do is if I've already talked to them about it, I'll just say they, and then they'll realize, probably repeat it back, which is really helpful to just let the other person know that you get it, to say they after being corrected and go on. If I haven't talked to them about it, I'll just be like, oh, actually, I or whoever we're talking about goes by these pronouns. As for other pronouns, so some non-binary people do use gendered pronouns, like I use they, them, and he, him, but I still consider myself non-binary. That's pretty much like, you don't have to understand someone's identity entirely to respect them. If you're talking to someone, they are willing to explain more, then go for it. But otherwise, it's just kind of like, that's their pronouns, that's it. And neopronouns are new pronouns that are being created that may come up. There's like Z and here and Faye, all kinds of things. You can research that. Those are definitely, I'm not even used to them yet. That's one thing I'm working on. But yeah, if you want to look more into that in case they come up sometime, I would encourage it. All right, names is pretty similar as for correcting yourself, and someone might try out several names. So just, support them as best you can. And if it's hard to adjust, like, just do your best, really. The main thing that's kind of its own thing, birth names and given names, that's one way to say the same thing. And dead names is when someone chooses a new name that feels more like them, then often they'll say that like their birth name is their dead name because it brings up so much discomfort and dysphoria related to that. And for some people, even bad memories if their family was really unsupportive, and those are kind of tied to that name as well as the gender discomfort. So if you see dead name, just know that's what it means, and avoid using someone's dead name or asking what it is. And as far as the note about the word real, their real name is the one that they chose. And if you don't want to say that, if you're a parent trying to adjust or any of those things, and you have a tie to the birth name as well, it's understandable. Just avoid the word real. And the same thing goes for like the gender in the pronouns is like saying like cis women and real women, like trans women are women and trans men are men, and that's that. So the word real doesn't have to be used in any of these instances, really. All right, next topic, gender expression. So already kind of talked about this a little bit about the gender non-conforming versus conforming to the gender roles. Can be trans or cis people that do or don't conform. And the same goes for non-binary people. We don't have to be androgynous to be non-binary. The identity can differ from the expression. And I think sometimes with like trans men and women, then they're expected to meet the gender roles maybe even more so or more strictly to like prove that they're trans, which is really just unfair because it's their way of expressing themselves and everyone should feel comfortable to do that however feels right. Um, some people it is very fluid and it might change, and that's might catch some people off guard, but I think the more that we see it, and whether it's online or with people we know, just the more we get used to it and the more we learn to accept it, and then maybe even explore some things yourself just for fun, because why not? Like, women weren't even wearing pants at one point. Like, like certain gender roles, they are becoming more flexible over time, and clothing doesn't have a gender, hair doesn't have a gender, it's just how we think about it and then put people in these boxes. More on the physical side, binding, tucking, and packing are all things to um, handle the like physical things before surgery or even without surgery. um, yeah, and it's related to passing in a sense, or at least sometimes it is. Passing is like sometimes it's just because a person wants to be, trying to think of the best way to say it. Sometimes it's related to safety. Like if someone has to pass as male or pass as female to be safe so that they're not like found out as trans, um, then that can be really hard, whether it's passing as the gender they do feel or passing as their assigned sex that they don't identify with. Um, and sometimes binding, tucking, packing, whatever else is related to that. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it like we might not pass, but those things still are how we want to express themselves and how we feel best. And so, do it anyway. And drag, just kind of a quick note on that. I think sometimes people get confused how it's related. Drag is really its own thing. It's a performance. It's an exaggerated expression, and it's just its own thing. Okay, more on the transitioning. So I already said this, but transitioning is not required to be trans, and everyone's experience is different. Social transitioning is also part of it. Like I said, it's not just medical, so that includes like the name and pronouns, for example, just being out in that sense, and possibly legal changes, whether it's legally changing your name. But there's also a new or fairly new non-binary designation. So like on certain legal documents like your driver's license, not in all states, but definitely California and I think New York and a few others, you can get an X instead of an F or an M for non-binary. So that is another possible change. Or if it is, male to female or female to male on that legal change, there's that too, of course. Medically, yeah, the saying gender affirming surgery is pretty much the best phrase these days. Instead of like sex change is definitely outdated. Avoid that. Or same thing of like, they used to be this, or they became this. Like, just avoid it. If you're talking about surgery, particularly for whatever reason, gender affirming is just a really nice, positive way to word it. And the last thing I wanted to mention is gender dysphoria, that feeling of discomfort. That is called, like, that is technically a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis. Like, you can look it up in your insurance or with the health organizations, but the transgender identity is not. People used to think of being transgender as like a mental illness or disorder, and now luckily they've updated things in a much more positive light. So we can identify the feeling, the dysphoria, and maybe get the surgeries or hormones covered by insurance because of that, but our identity is still valid and human. So relationships. I said, that it's kind of, it's separate. The orientation is different, but I did want to mention a couple things. Trans people can have just as meaningful and loving relationships with everyone in their life, just as everyone else in the LGBTQ plus community, just as all the cisgender, heterosexual allies, everybody. It doesn't mean that we will have a harder life. Our society can be rough. It can be hard on us, but with family support and with those around us, we can still have positive mental health, and we can definitely have loving relationships of any kind. I've put it again, people of any gender, maybe any sexuality. So you don't need to make assumptions there, just ask if you want to know. And the last part of this is that they may or may not want to be parents. So this is a big one for our parents because, whether it's coming out as gay or bi or trans, sometimes the reaction is, oh, so you're not going to like have the life that you might have imagined. Sometimes it's like expecting your daughter to marry a boy, your son to marry a woman, and then that changes. Or with trans people, especially if medically transitioning, that might change how we feel about parenting, especially biologically. And so it's a big thing for families to like reimagine their kids' future, I guess. The dysphoria, whether it's around giving birth or any part of it, even the relationships to do that. Hormones, they can cause infertility, so that's a factor. There's also adopting, which, regardless of the feeling about biological parenting, sometimes I think, at least with people I've talked to, then we want to help other kids like us. And so in the future, to be able to adopt and help other kids that have been through stuff, whether they're queer or not, like, that's just a good feeling, having gone through stuff ourselves. And partnership is another thing because, wherever we're at in our lives, not everyone wants to be a single parent or, you want to be able to do it with somebody else, and that's valid regardless. And if you simply don't want to, valid. Like, cisgender, transgender, like, anybody could want a parent or not be a parent. And we put a lot of expectations and like values of these accomplishments of graduating school, education, but then marriage and family, and not everybody wants to get married or have a family. So it's just another thing to expand your mind, but stay open to it as best you can. And it's a good conversation to have. So that was a lot. I have a few more things for you, but I want to take a moment to kind of take a quick breather. Also, if you have any questions so far based off of that, definitely put it in the chat. We'll still wait till the end to get to it, but just so you don't forget, feel free to put it in there, or any comments you have even. I love the Pinocchio comment, by the way. All right, let's continue. Frequently used words. We're going to kind of open the conversation up a little bit more with as far as going from very specifically trans to kind of how you can just be more inclusive in general. So guys, that's what I'm also guilty of saying to a group, just, hey guys. So I definitely use y'all. If you're informal like me, you can use y'all. But same goes for ladies and gentlemen. You can just say everyone or people. Folks is another thing you may have seen on social media or wherever. And they've been using it with the X recently to be more inclusive. So yeah, queer is kind of iffy. Be careful with it, maybe avoid it altogether. But that being said, a lot of people now are reclaiming the term. It used to be a slur, so especially older generations have a negative connotation to it, but younger people may be reclaiming it, even using it as their only label. They might just identify as queer. So basically a blanket rule is follow the words that that specific person uses. So if they're saying transgender, if they're saying queer, if they're saying gay or lesbian, like whatever words they're using, their pronouns, like all of it, just go based off what's best for them. And then generally speaking, just be as inclusive and safe as possible. Other outdated terms are transsexual, hermaphrodite, which the new word for that is intersex, since we covered that. Transvestite and crossdresser, also not good. Go with drag, intersex, transgender, all the things we talked about earlier. And I don't know if they're necessarily frequently used, but I have heard them come up still, so just be aware of that. And lastly, girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband may still be used. Again, play it by whatever the person uses, but neutral terms, if you're looking for that, are partner. And I've also heard NB friend, because NB, ENBY, is short for non-binary. So let us shorten with the NB and then add it to friend, like girlfriend and boyfriend. I don't know how many people use it, but I've seen it come up multiple times, so I felt like it was worth including. And there's plenty more that are less common, but still other options if you don't like partner for some reason or whatever. How this all affects you slash everyone. Talking about gender stuff, it's not just for the trans community. It's everyone, because our society with these gender roles and the stereotypes, it's limiting everyone as we grow up. We learn it as we grow up, and it stays with us, and then it affects how we see other people and then putting them in those boxes. So if you can, I'd kind of like, if you think about yourself, how do you fit or not fit gender roles or stereotypes? Is there anything that you do, whether it's clothing wise, whether it's profession wise, whatever it is, that might be considered, oh, well, that's a woman's thing, or that's a guy's thing? Like, whether it's old, like in olden days, like women wearing skirts and dresses instead of pants, or saying that certain jobs are more for certain genders. Like, really think about that, because we are still growing and there's a long way to go. And it affects you too. And body image is related to that. We know with social media how like unhealthy the beauty standards are and impossible. So that's related to gender, how we're supposed to be, you know, sexualized or not sexualized, and how much you can be, how you express yourself, like what kinds of things you're posting, or how you feel about your body. Like, all of that is included and tied to gender strongly. And media with also, because I know there's some parents on here, how it affects your kids with what they're seeing. With the whole thing of like, oh, well, if my kid sees a gay person on TV, like it'll turn them gay. That's not how it works. I would be cisgender otherwise, but here I am. So I would also be straight, and that's not the case. Um, so, we're going to be how we're going to be. It's just who we are. But if we don't see representation of that, then kids growing up, they don't see themselves, so they are more likely to think, oh, something's wrong with me, which can get very negative very quickly. And, maybe it'll lead to them taking longer to come out or longer to face their identity and just have some negative mental health with that way because they don't understand themselves yet and there's nowhere for them to look. But even if they're not part of the LGBTQ plus community, like I mentioned, the outlook on others, if they don't see that and then say their friend comes out to them, their immediate reaction is going to be like, well, I don't know what that is. I don't understand that. That's weird. And again, with the negative mental health and kind of down from there. But the more we talk about it, like you may think, well, I can't really affect that. That's too big, or that's for LGBTQ plus people just have to get out there more. Well, one thing is the pronouns in the social media bio. There's also like following pages that talk about these issues so that you understand more. You can always repost things, kind of stay in the know as much as possible, and just be there for the people around you as much as you can. Let them know that you support them, be open to the things that they share with you. And if you're putting that positive, inclusive energy out, like people will know, people will take notice, and you might realize like how the conversations you have might change a bit. Or if you're reposting something, maybe you'll help someone that you don't even know, or you don't even know that they're part of the community, but you could help them just by sharing it. So that's hopefully helpful. And kind of the last mention is our culture with these the binary genders and all the gender roles and everything, it's not the same everywhere. Other cultures recognize non-binary identities, have different words for it. And so here are some examples. There's two-spirit in Native American cultures, and that's, if you go long enough in the LGBTQ acronym, you might see a 2S, which is for two-spirit, which is basically like a combination of male and female identities. There's also, I don't know how to say these, so do some research, and maybe you can tell me at some point. But Hijira in India, Fa'afafine and Fa'afatama in Samoa, Mahu in Hawaii, and Kathoe, not sure, in Thailand. And there's plenty more as well. So I think it's interesting to learn about. But again, being aware of like kind of outside this space that we get stuck in of like our world, our community, our family, and our school, like kind of staying in this small place. But if you look more out there, there's plenty more people that are exploring things or maybe further along than our culture is in these ways. So that's interesting. So that is actually the end of the presentation. So we will have a Q&A. I also want to put up some resources. I will put a doc in the chat with all of these, as well as some Respect All Love links, but they're for LGBTQ plus people, for trans people. PFLAG is specifically for families, friends, and allies. So check that out. And also like the hotline and a crisis text line for mental health stuff. So yeah, with that said, I know that was a lot of information, but if you have any questions, I would love to hear them. And Robin, if there's anything on the Facebook, then definitely let me know from there as well. But any initial comments, questions, thoughts, anything?
I would like to add something, if I may.
Absolutely.
This applies not just to gender issues, but for everybody, perhaps you can consider your multiple identities as you watch this. In media representation, there are 4 stages of acknowledgement. Now, this would be if you're watching a TV show or a commercial, how is your group, your identity portrayed? The first stage is it's invisible. It doesn't exist. So if we take as an example, rather than gender, if we took a minority group, African American, for instance, that was not seen a lot in television. So that first stage is as if you don't exist. So if that is you and you're watching it, that definitely affects your self-esteem and how you go about your life and how you're treated by others. The second stage is ridicule. So you will be included, but you will be the entertainment. You will be the anomaly that is the funny character or the weird character or the villain. That's stage 2. Stage 3, you'll be included as long as you behave. And what that means is your characters, say I used African American, will be included in the cast as long as they conform to the majority's normative standards of behavior, as long as they fit in. And then the 4th stage, which is what we all want, is full acceptance and respect. And that comes from recognizing a full human who is also flawed. And so as you watch television, as you watch movies, as you watch advertising, for your gender identity, as well as all your identities, look to see where is the society and your culture placing you now. It'll be very informative.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Kasia, you had a question?
Sorry, I lost track of how to unmute myself. And that was so informative, Rowan. Everything is just it's so clear and much easier for us to follow. I have a question that's kind of specific. So I'm not sure if it's a situation that many people would find themselves in, but I think it can pertain in different ways to the group. And that is that Rowan, you know, as we've talked about, we've been really fortunate and honored that a lot of my children's friends have chosen to express their truth maybe for the first time at our house or in our presence, or privately to my children. And in some cases, it's something that they've expressed to their families. In other cases, either they may be, you know, more comfortable sharing it with a friend, but haven't shared it with their own parents, or also feel that there might not be, like in one case that I can think of, a really warm reception to their truth. And so it's brought up the idea to me of, I want to respect their identity. I want to use their pronouns. But if I'm unsure whether or not whether or not their parents have been, you know, whether it's been shared with their parents, or I'm sometimes unsure whether they know that my children have also shared that information with me. Sorry, this sounds convoluted. I'm wondering about addressing them in public in situations where their parents are also there, if I don't hear their parents using the pronouns, because I don't want to jump the gun or make their parents sort of, you know, cause any rift there, but I don't want to seem like I'm not respecting their pronouns. So it's very specific, but it's actually been a situation that we found ourselves in on a few occasions.
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up. So basically, I mean, if somebody comes out to you directly, then it's always smart to ask, like, do other people know about your name or your pronouns or whatever they're coming out to you about? Is it safe to use that name and pronouns around other people? And they'll let you know, like, well, if I'm around my family, if I'm around my parents, say, then, if they don't know yet, then use, these pronouns instead, just if it's about being safe or if they're not comfortable with that yet. Um, with your situation of like your kids' friends, I'm sure you could ask your kids like if they've told the friend that you know. Um, and then if they do, then maybe you can talk to them directly while they're there. Like if you're with your kids and their friends there and just have like an open conversation about it, and it's coming from a great positive, kind place. So I'm sure it will be well received that you just want to be respectful and be kind with their identity and do what's best for them. Um, so yeah, they will let you know, but it's definitely okay to ask.
Thank you, Rowan. As the kids get older, like the kids that are in the 14, 15, it's a little bit easier to sort of like have that conversation. But I've been a little more tentative about it with my son's friend who is 12 or not 12 yet, because I know that might be uncomfortable for them to have a parent, suddenly like on board, or they're wondering about it, especially when that's like sharing of the truth was so new. But that's a great idea to use the word safe, and also to just approach them directly, maybe in a private space, and say, how would you like me to address you when we're in public, and kind of. And I know too that sometimes with the younger age group, just keeping things as simple as that sometimes is a bit better. May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
A lot of the people that are sharing their truth are kids that we've known and have been calling by their sort of like gender assigned at birth pronoun for a long time. And I've slipped up, like not to the person, but to like to my daughter, and she'll say, "What's that you said?" She's very on top of it about correcting me if I, because we've known them for so long. Um, but if I do that in public, like really love how you said correct yourself, but don't necessarily dwell on it. Um, but what's the best way if you're unsure, or if someone might be trying out one pronoun and settling into what's comfortable for them? Is it okay to check in with them when you see them in a kind of casual way and say, am I correct that your pronouns are this, or is that an infringement if it's someone that's very young?
I think it's always great to ask questions like that, um, because I mean, we did talk about things not to ask, but those are
Yeah.
really more the, like very personal things related to like physical stuff, and medical stuff or whatnot. But when it comes to like pronouns and names and stuff, like those kinds of questions are pretty much always appreciated. And sometimes with like the fluid expression or trying out something new, it may vary. And so that check-in is sometimes like a highlight in my day. Like I know when I was trying out something new, like my friends would kind of check in with me and be like, "Hey, how are you feeling today? Like, would you prefer they? Would you prefer he? Like, are you trying this new name? Should I use that?" Like, and it was a great space to be in because I felt more seen that way. So yeah, does that answer enough?
Yeah, it's great to know, because it does, veering into like medical history. I want to make sure that I'm not infringing on someone's privacy or making them feel sort of more exposed than they or feel comfortable being. But it's good to know that generally the reception is going to be a feeling of relief and being seen when someone checks in with you, rather than, being a little too forward. And I'll try to keep it simple and kind of casual when I mention it.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. I see in the chat a question about the word mahu possibly being derogatory. So I believe from what I read that I think it was one of those that like it used to be derogatory or in certain spaces by certain people, but it's been kind of used again and a little bit reclaimed. So if you find out something that differs from that, I would love to know that and be aware. But as far as I know, it's not like it's a reclaimed term. So it may kind of vary like the word queer, but they are using it presently. Yes. Any other questions or anything someone wants to bring up?
I'm just happy y'all folks are starting to bring some country dialogue into the city life.
Definitely. Yes, I think I've gotten more and more so as time goes on. And I use y'all pretty much constantly. So of course, James, I'm glad that cleared things up. I also want to just give a shout out to all the donations that we got. This is a free event, and I didn't expect anything beyond that. Just kind of threw in the donation option just in case. And several people came through with donations, and it touched me so much. You can ask Robin. I was like brought to tears a couple times at least, because this means so much to me, and to get that kind of support, it helps us move forward and be able to have more things like this and reach more people. So I just wanted to bring that up because that was hugely appreciated, especially for a free event. Like, wow. And for those of you that haven't donated, if you would like to, I'll put that link in the chat, and it's also on the resources list. So feel free.
We're so appreciative of having the resource and a place for information and learning in such a kind and welcoming kind of dynamic.
Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. And yeah, I want to make as big a difference as possible. And if I can be there to help anybody, like, I'm here. I'm open to all questions, even if you have a question that's, and this is anytime, not just now, but like that you're unsure, like, oh, well, I don't know how to word this. So before I talk to someone, like, you can ask me with horrible wording and I will help correct you. Like, yeah, I love doing this anyways. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yes, you can see Robin typing in the chat. Yeah. I definitely gushed like every single time there was a donation. I was like, we got a donation. This is amazing. Let's see, we got another question. Oh, okay. Looks like it was answered. Okay, cool. There's
Do people still have pen pals and things like that and reach out to other youth across the nation? I mean, I sort of wonder because we're in this microcosm of Los Angeles in a super urban area. And, students in New York City, I would imagine, have the same level of comfort and protections that we have in such a liberal place. But I know that, coming from the Midwest and living in the South and living in Wyoming and all these different areas over the years, I've met a lot of, I've always had the safe space and the safe zone stickers on my office doors and things like that. And I've always been approached by people going through transitions, whether or not it's trans or just gender identity, sexual orientation, or other issues. And I know it's a lot harder in terms of culture and society in some of these more conservative areas. So I just wonder if there's any bridge from someone like the folks on this chat that are young, that are very in tune and into it and plugged in and shaking and moving and making things happen, to provide that resource to other students in those areas where they're not going to find something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know about like the pen pals thing, kind of the one-on-one to talk to. I know. I mean, some of the resources on that list are at least nationwide. So from any state wherever you are, if you need someone to talk to, definitely like spread those around. Like the Trevor Project is specifically for LGBTQ plus people and their mental health. So they have a hotline 24/7. It's for at least the whole US. And whether it's a crisis or not, they will take the call and talk someone through that related to any of the issues that you mentioned. Um, Other than that, I know on social media, like if they have access to that, some people will find ways to connect that way, but it can be hard to find an individual unless like they're on an LGBTQ plus page and like managing that. Then sometimes you might find a one-on-one that way. Um, but yeah. And I don't know if that helped at all. I'm just kind of trying to find any way.
Oh yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. I'm just brainstorming. Maybe that's something that y'all want to consider in the future as outreach into, I don't know if we could call it less fortunate areas. I mean, it sounds like socioeconomic, you say that, but less fortunate in terms of culture and acceptance certainly is the case in some of those places.
Yeah. And definitely like going forward with respect all of, I want to travel more to be able to like be in those areas and see what's going on, what they have, like whether there's clubs or not, whether there's organizations in the area. Because like here in LA, we've got the LA LGBT Center, we've got like chapters of PFLAG and Glisten and like you name it. But I want to be able to travel first, like through the US, through different states, help in the schools, pretty much talk anywhere I can, have some events, and then hopefully go beyond that to international level. And whether it's just events or whether it's like kind of more in-depth programs to help raise that acceptance, that's like the ultimate goal. So we'll get there. Just gonna catch up on the chat over here. Oh yeah, Kasi, you have another question?
Shocking, I know. But I wanted to follow up on the idea of signage about safe space. Like I have been thinking about things that we can put in our home for hopefully whenever we can gather again. And we tended to be kind of like the gathering space or the stomping ground for the kids, friends to all come over. And I would like to put some things in our home that are either subtle or not subtle signs that it's a safe space. I mean, obviously they can tell that I think we're approachable and, trying to honor everyone's truth. But are there, for people that might be wondering or don't know us very well, are there any things we can put around that's, not going to make them feel as though we're infringing on their privacy, but lets them know this is a house of acceptance?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can be a really small thing, and there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm not sure what exactly you're looking for, but like there's some simple artwork that's inclusive, or like a doormat sounds like the wrong thing, but for some reason that's like an image that came to my mind because I feel like I've seen some in the past. But even those have like simple welcoming phrases.
Yeah,
But
we
like
need a new doormat. So.
there you go. Another example is like I have this like canvas artwork that's got like stick figures on it basically. It's not that fancy, but it's a set of them and they're in a rainbow, and it says like love is love on it, I believe, and we put it like right in the doorway so that anybody who comes in just sees that like instant acceptance. Of course we're all queer here anyways, so there's that. But there's other things like that whether it's like there's an ally flag, or if you don't want to go the flag route, then just like one of those things that has an inclusive phrase on it. Yeah.
I've been looking at some love is love things, and I think that would be a great place to start. So I'm glad to hear that is a good idea.
Yes, I literally have it in my apartment. So,
My old coexist one is religious, sort of.
Oh,
oh,
But I wonder if there's anything that's like this, similar, that's you know, more up to
mm.
date. It's an old one, something very
right.
old.
I actually have a bumper sticker of that on my car. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Mm. Thank you.
Of course. Wow, we're getting into it in the chat. I love it. And thank you also for the Hope in a Box recommendation. I will check that out. All right. Might take like one or two more questions if you have them. So feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. While you think a couple more minutes, I want to just say our next event is a couple weeks from tomorrow. So we are not waiting long to get back into it. But the next one is an Arrow Ace Valentine's Day. So for anyone who is on the aromantic and or asexual spectrum, it's a Valentine's Day space for them and anyone that they might want to invite, whether it's friends or partners that are romantic or platonic, whatever is fine. But yeah, let everyone know about that. And if somebody on the spectrum invites you, which may also be me inviting you, then you are welcome as well. Basically, we'll have some influencers come that are on one or both spectrums to talk about their experience with their identity and talking about it publicly. And then we'll just have an open space to discuss the topics related to those identities and just hang out, because it's a holiday that's very romantic, but not everyone has that kind of attraction or is interested in those kinds of relationships. So keep that in mind. The Eventbrite just went up during this event, so that is now live. If you would like to share it, or whether it's to your kids or your friends or at school, that is there, and it is also completely free. Thank you. It's good to see you. I'm glad you can make it, and have a good one. Thanks, once. Yes, Kasia, she would probably attend on her own. If she wants you there, that's totally fine too. But
Okay.
up to her.
Okay. I can ask her what her comfort level is
Yeah,
for that. But I'm excited for that for her.
but yeah, I'm excited to meet her and be able to have a space like that for her, since she recently was going through that.
Yeah. If we were on campus, I'm sure you would have run into her many, many times.
All right. Okay. I'll take one last question we've got in the chat. What would you recommend for restrooms at large venues where the restrooms have to accommodate more than one person at a time? That is a great and complicated topic. Shortly, I will try to keep it short. Yes. So when it comes to all gender restrooms, the simple solution is having the one person restroom. So when it comes to the stalls, I mean, there's always the possibility of having the male and female restrooms with the stalls, and then just having having the singular option there as well. So that's one possibility. There's a lot of controversy on the several stall restroom that is all gender for many reasons. But I think regardless, that option always needs to be there for all gender restroom, because when it comes to passing, when it comes to safety, when it comes to not being out, all of those things, it's when non-binary people not knowing where the heck to go, do I run into the wall in between like Harry Potter, or what do I do? So yeah, I wish I had a great solution to that, but I don't. That's pretty much where it's at right now. Yeah, exactly. Restroom 9 3/4 and a half. There's plenty of jokes like that on social media because, and you're usually right next to each other, so it's convenient. You're like, well, I'll just run in between and hope to end up somewhere. All right, if that is all, thank you again. That is the end of gender terminology. I'm happy you can make it. Hope it was helpful. If you think of any questions after the event, feel free to email me. That is also in the resources list, so grab that before you go. And I will hopefully see you at the next one or another one very soon.